Hi, and welcome back to our Sustainable Futures Career Conversations. I'm pleased to be joined today by Toby Gibbs. Toby, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Thank you, Paul. I will. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Toby Gibbs. I'm a director of the Logika Group. Logika Group are an environmental consultancy, an independent environmental consultancy, comprising three separate companies: Logika Consultants, Air Quality Consultants, and Noise Consultants, and together we have a 30-year heritage.
Fantastic. And we'll go into the details of that later on, but I want to start by talking about your early career as an environmental consultant, what got you into it, how that's evolved, and some of the projects you've worked on. So what's the starting point for you?
Well, I'm actually an ecologist. The starting point for me, I think, was growing up in Cornwall. So grew up very rurally in Cornwall. My grandfather was a big natural historian, spent a lot of time on the cliffs and the moors of Cornwall, and then still didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so went travelling around the world for a couple of years. And as a result of that, was able to witness and in fact get involved in a number of conservation projects. And as a result of that, I decided in that sort of gap period to come back and pursue a career in ecology and more generally the environmental sector.
Fantastic. And so you got quite quickly into that consultancy space, didn't you?
I did. I was at university studying ecology-related subjects, and one of my lecturers, his wife was an ecological consultant, and asked me in my second of 3 years whether I wanted to do some work experience, in fact, paid work experience. I was very happy to accept that, as you might be, and pretty much I've never left the sector since then. That was 8 years ago, something like that.
Fantastic. And since then, you've sort of evolved from that relatively narrow ecological space into a broader EIA and then wider business management. So just to explore that sort of evolution of those skills, if I can use that phrase.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I still do an awful lot of work in ecology, and it's still, a real love of mine. In fact, I still enjoy botanising when I can, but yes, you're right. I've developed and I also lead sort of major environmental impact assessment projects, and over the past 10 or 15 years, then have been more and more involved in business management, or at least were more involved, and now have sort of moved back into at least in part a significant technical role as well.
Excellent. And that's something you enjoy still, so it's nice to keep the hand in.
Yeah, I mean, the philosophy of the Logika Group is that everybody still does project work, and we think that's, unusual in the sector. But it's something that we very much think is important. We need everybody, whether it be a director or an assistant consultant, to be heavily involved in what we actually deliver to our clients, and then they understand the pressures, and the pressures and the impacts that we live with and our clients live with every single day.
Absolutely. And you've been involved over a period of real development of the environmental and sustainability sector. Just talk a little bit, if you would, about how you've seen that evolve and the opportunities for people evolve over that time.
Oh, hugely. There's been a huge turnaround. It really has. When I got into the sector in the sort of late 1990s, it was a sector that was dominated by natural historians. It was guided, of course, by legislation, but I'm not entirely sure that the legislation was always imposed in the way that it should have been. And frankly, at the time, there was little guidance to help support us. But I think I started, the environmental consultancy sector has been going on for 20 years before I started in it. But certainly the evolution since then has been significant. I think driven by ever increasing legislation, or certainly up until recently, ever increasing legislative requirements, and also, as I say, the imposing of that legislation as well.
And more of an awareness of the importance in a broader sense, so companies are more willing to allocate money towards these projects. It's still a challenge, but...
It is a challenge, but I think fundamentally, you're absolutely right, Paul. I think companies and individuals, actually not just recognise the importance of sustainability, of being sustainable, operating sustainably, building sustainably, but also, they they themselves want to do it as well. So it becomes, a sort of a moral point as well as being, something that they're required to do.
Yes, I've definitely seen that movement from compliance to, okay, what can we do? That little bit of added value that these things can bring to the projects we're working on and to the way that the organisation and the project you're working on is seen, which is really encouraging.
It's incredibly encouraging, and you're absolutely right. It has changed significantly. People say it's changed quite a lot since COVID. I think it actually had changed or was changing before that. I think it's been an evolution probably since 2015-ish. And I think now we have a sector that is driven by trying to meet the highest environmental standards we possibly can do.
Yes. And it's interesting that E bit of that ESG agenda is evolving again now, I think. And I'm hearing a lot about biodiversity and the importance of nature in the conversation that's going on within boardrooms, which is something you just wouldn't have heard about previously.
No. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's gone from, honestly, being somewhat of a laughing stock 20 years ago, where everybody that was involved in ecology was a tree hugger, to now being, you're absolutely right, a key agenda item on board meetings of the largest corporates in the world, and absolutely right, because the basis of a good environment starts with strong biodiversity. So absolutely key.
Absolutely. So just thinking about your sort of long career, are there projects that stand out for you and particular situations that you've thought, okay, that's really made a difference, or I've really enjoyed that project?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I worked for the Wildlife Trust for a couple of years in the early part of my career, and although I had a wonderful time working for the Wildlife Trust, I actually realised, having spent some time in consultancy before that I could make more of a difference in consultancy than I could in working with the Wildlife Trust. It's not to say that the Wildlife Trust don't do amazing things, they do, but actually you can unlock huge opportunities to fund really major environmental gain projects within the consultancy sector. So some projects are small. Just recently, actually, we finished a project called Lower Valley Farm, which is a biodiversity net gain donor site. So very current. So it's a site that Cambridgeshire County Council own, and a project whereby we're delivering huge biodiversity benefits, and developers will be able to buy those units and use them if they can't create the required biodiversity gain on the sites that they're developing. So that's been a hugely enjoyable project. And then I've worked on some of the big projects as well. So I've worked in sort of airport development and worked really hard to deliver sustainable aviation. So on projects for Heathrow and others in the past as well. So they go from relatively small projects to really very large ones.
Yes. It's a question I often ask consultants, which is how you balance that best advice with a commercial imperative that the client has. So you've almost got two competing parts of your role. How have you found that?
I think they're probably less competing now than they once were, if I'm absolutely honest with you. And I think for the reasons we spoke about just earlier, in that the E part of ESG is high on the agenda. But fundamentally, I come from an environmental background, and so I want to deliver the best I can environmentally within what are often, commercial constraints. But, the beauty of Logika, and one of the reasons we set Logika up, was that, we are independent of any of the big engineering firms. It's not to say that the big engineering firms don't do great environmental work. They do. There are lots of brilliant people that work from them. But we only have environment. That's the only thing we deliver. So it does mean, and we're very honest with our clients, that achieving the best environmental outcome within other constraints is absolutely our priority.
Yes, indeed. So let's start thinking about skills a little bit and how that's related. And I'm interested how you've evolved your sort of technical skill set over the years to become a little bit more around the business management and that focus as well.
Yeah, well, I've been very lucky, as probably everyone that sits here has said. In my career, I've had really good people to learn from, and I've worked for very good organisations. I spent a lot of time working for a company called Entech, who you'll remember, Paul.
Very well, yes.
Who then were acquired and, of course, now are part of WSP. But as Entech, they were really an environmental consultancy with a small engineering piece. And so I was very lucky to work for them because it taught me how to manage an environmental consultancy and what the key issues are around there. So I started as an ecologist, and I was able to develop a team, which then became a wider environment team. And before very long, I was, a regional director, and then took over as the UK director, and eventually ended up running the global environmental team of what was then Wood. And so it took some time, and I learned from a lot of very great people around me.
Yes.
And the one thing I'd say about the world of an environmental consultant is it isn't just about delivering, ecology. I mean, you do have to have a well-rounded set of skills.
Increasingly so, I think.
Exactly. And so you do have to have a business acumen. You need to understand the commercial aspects. You need to be able to communicate with clients in a wide variety of stakeholders, as well as going out and perhaps being a good, great botanist. So and so for me, those skills, certainly weren't with me at the beginning, but I was able to develop them, over the course of a number of years.
Fantastic. We'll come back to that, I think, later on. But I'm interested to pick up on that theme of where the market's going, what the sort of skills that are required now, and how that environment sustainability consulting space is evolving. I think you're doing more and more work in that policy and side with Logika. And
we do a lot of work in policy, and actually what we like to say is sort of the whole life cycle of a project, really. So we work within policy, we work then within its implementation, whether we're working for a developer or whether we're working for government, and then we monitor and audit the outcomes of that work as well. But I mean, what I'd say about the sector is, much like any other sectors, it's becoming very technology driven. So we generate a lot of data. We collect a lot of data, some of it from field survey, some of it in quite inefficient ways, if we're honest. And we, historically, I think the sector has probably been behind others or some others in terms of its, the way it embraces technology. I think that's going to change. We have data scientists now working, within Logika, and those data scientists are probably going to become ever more important. I mean, I'm quite sure I'll become a little bit of a spare part in all of that, but it's really key that is, that we embrace technology and that we utilise that, and I think that will become absolutely core to the work that we do.
Are there any particular areas that you're seeing that more than others, or is it across the board?
A whole range actually. Baseline data collection, then analysis of baseline data, the presentation of data, AI to undertake assessments or to continue to better inform assessments, and then even report writing. So there's a whole variety of different ways that technology is going to help support, I think, better environmental outcomes. What I would say is I think there's always going to be a need for, us, of course, to be able to set stuff up, to model, to monitor, to support, to check, to verify, and also to present, because of course AI will learn, and but ultimately quite a lot of what we do is grey. There's areas in the middle, and so but I think the role will be informed by technology as we move forward, for sure.
That was sort of going to be one of my other questions, is how the skills of the environmental consultant today and what they need if they're coming into the market, how they should consider the sort of future-proofing that career. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think being tech savvy is absolutely key. It really is. But I think some of the core attributes still remain from when I started. Passionate about making a difference in environmental terms. I think being a good communicator is utterly key in all of this. I think being able to, I mean, consultancy, if it's environmental consultancy specifically, we're talking about there are peaks, many peaks, and if the sector's booming, not so many troughs, which is a good thing, and so being able to ride those out and be resilient in those areas is really important as well. But if you do that, if you are able to do that, then you'll get a career that's really quite diverse in what it requires you to do. There aren't many careers that where you can be out on site in beautiful locations, and the next day perhaps being in front of a politician presenting, and the day after that maybe in the office writing a report. It is a very diverse career for sure.
Yes, and quite an international one as well. There are lots of opportunities to look at those international.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there are obviously some markets that are quite mature in terms of their environmental consultancy offer, but there are also lots of opportunities to support countries or regions where perhaps the implementation of environmental legislation or even the development of that environmental legislation is some way away from where we are here in the UK, and I think it's so bringing skills and experience from the likes of the UK is really, really important. I think as long as when you do that, you seek to build capacity, within local, the local environment as well, for local people too. So I think what we shouldn't be expecting is that we're always going to be delivering work in a particular part of Africa. What we should be trying to do is to ensure that the skills and experience that we have learned over the years here are, as I say, support capacity building with with local people.
Yes. I'm going to just sort of slightly change tack a little bit, because I'm interested in that role of the consultant versus the in-house, and that sort of dynamic between those two. I would suggest that the in-house teams are becoming more and more aware and conscious of what they're doing. Has the way that your consultancy or feeds into that evolved with that ESG agenda and with the different sorts of clients?
I think every client is different. I think within some clients you've got fairly substantive teams that are dealing with ESG or dealing in particular with the environmental sustainability piece, and others they may have just one or two individuals, and it's they need consultants to support even early setting of objectives. So it can be different. You can, and the nature of the way we work with clients is very different. But I don't think it's changed that much from where we were previously. Exactly. The skills that are needed from us are still much the same.
And people come to consultancies for specific technical expertise, and so that's the core of your offering.
Exactly that. If niche activities, niche skills and experience that it wouldn't merit them having in-house, because it would, they're probably only called upon for a few hours or a few days or a few weeks, per year. So that's where, consultancy, really supports, big corporates and all organisations.
Absolutely. And we're sort of coming towards an end. It's gone very quickly. We're coming towards the end. So I'm interested just to get your nuggets for the next generation. We've touched on a few of these themes, I think, already. But are there any particular piece of advice you'd give to people entering this space?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to the point I made, before. It's be passionate about wanting to make a difference, and certainly. For us at Logika, that's absolutely key. So when we see, new graduates, be absolute, come across as being passionate for making a difference. The other thing is, that there are probably more opportunities than there were, but there's still maybe not as many opportunities as there are graduates on the market. Yes. You probably know this better than I do. So, if you can do some voluntary work beforehand, if you can demonstrate that passion, if you like, and you have something on your CV, then, that's really, really important for us. It's what I did. And I would say that, the majority of our graduates, when we see, 15 plus CVs for a graduate role, those that have demonstrated to us that they, really are invested in this and they've already put the time in. Other ones that we tend to pick out, and just one other, make sure the CV is well written as well. It's so important. You probably know that as well as anybody.
And not generated by AI, which
exactly. Put some personality into it as well.
And I'll just sort of add to that a little bit, that it's about demonstrating passion through having gone out of your way to take control of it. So people who've done extra bits and it just looking for things to stand you out from the crowd is really
absolutely
important.
I worked for the Wildlife Trust during the whole period I was at university, volunteered for the Wildlife Trust, I should say. It probably only amounted to 5 hours a week, but it was probably the thing that got me that opportunity, really, that gave me my first sort of step on the ladder.
And the first step is always the most difficult one.
It's absolutely. I think, it is a sector that, what I'll say, and, we know this because we talk regularly, once you get to sort of 5 to 10 years of experience, you are very in demand, and there are probably not enough people in that sort of area, so yeah, getting the first step is very much the hardest.
Yeah. Fantastic. That sort of opportunity is a good place to finish, I think. Toby, thank you. That's been fantastic. I hope you've enjoyed that as much as I have. Thank you for that insight, Toby. And yes, I look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Thank you.